Hello, cinefans. I'm Kendall Kroover, and this is Watching Classic Movies. My guest is John DiLeo, author of 8 film books, including his latest, not even nominated, 40 overlooked co-stars of Oscar-winning performances. We talked about the common characteristics of great performances that nevertheless get overlooked for awards attention, some of our favorite deserving performances, and the way perception makes a movie a unique experience for each viewer. Welcome, John. It's so great to have you back on the show today.
Kendall, it's a delight to be with you again.
Well, here we are with 8 books. 8 books! I'm so impressed.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Where did the time go?
Right. And then I just
for
showed
25 years.
Yeah. And I just want to talk about how I just showed you a book, my first book that I got of yours, 100 Great Film Performances You Should Remember, but probably don't. That's been on my shelf for a long time,
Great.
long before we
Yes.
ever had a chance to talk.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you.
And I also just have to say that the actual physical book, I love ebooks, but give me a great physical release. There's actually a ribbon bookmark in this book. It is
Yeah.
gorgeous.
Thank you. I am lucky with a publisher who loves to make beautiful books. So it's old school in the best way possible.
Right? Oh, it's wonderful. And I really appreciate that. I love this idea that you start with in your book, because we're talking about performances that weren't nominated for awards that were deserving. But you say, how absurd awards are to begin with.
Yeah, I just want to get that out of the way. That's like the first line in the introduction about, competitive awards in the arts are inherently ludicrous, even stupid. Okay, we got that out of the way. Now let's have some fun and dish about the Oscars. And so I acknowledge the kind of silliness of the whole concept, but then I also admit my compulsion about it. And obviously the book is for people who feel the way I do, who just want to thrash through this and agree and disagree. And I love it, I hate it, and all that stuff, which a lot of movie lovers love to sit around and do with each other or with a book or whatever forum we have.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is, as silly as it seems, it does get us movie lovers into something we love, which is hashing it out, talking over the details, digging into it. And I mean, part of that is you kind of get into some characteristics of what is overlooked in the nature of what you picked. I mean, what do you see as some characteristics of performances, genres, and the like that tend to get overlooked by awards?
Well, in this case, with the people playing opposite someone who won, usually that person who won has the showier part. So that's sort of like the main way to get into this book, is that you have the more understated role, and what you're doing is just as important, just as difficult, just as essential. It's just you're acting with someone who's doing a lot of maybe acting with a capital A. Doesn't mean they're not doing it brilliantly. It's just more noticeable. And so I do love to write about people like Joel McCrea or Jeff Bridges, both of whom are in the book. And they're like the patron saints of understated acting, and have built these phenomenal resumes of performances. But Jeff Bridges did finally get his Oscar, but they're easy to overlook in their movies. And in Joel McCrea's case, the more the merrier, won for Charles Coburn, playing basically the foil to Jean Arthur. But the other foil to Jean Arthur in that movie is Joel McCrea. He's the more romantic end of things, but they're both wonderful with her, with each other, separately, all of that. But it's easy to overlook the guy who's underplaying and making it easy and never pushing for a laugh. And in Jeff Bridges' case in The Fisher King, everybody else has these big, intense, flamboyant roles. Right. Mercedes Ruehl, who won the Oscar, Robin Williams, who was nominated, even Amanda Plummer and Michael Jeter in a small role. But he's the sort of the quiet force that's percolating through the whole movie. And another thing I found in writing this book was the number of performances, and Jeff Bridges in The Fisher King is a perfect example. How the person overlooked is the guy the movie's about, or the woman. It's like, it's his story. The whole thing is him from A to Z and his growth. And the same thing is true in something like Rain Man, where Dustin Hoffman won for a very showy role. But it's the story of Tom Cruise, this slick, selfish guy who learns about love and family and humanity through the course of the movie. It's his story. And yet, how often it's easy to overlook that because, oh, they just seem to be playing themselves or just going along a regular person. But it's also acting and they're also making you feel stuff.
Yeah, right. I think there's also an element of genre being left
Uh-huh.
out, which isn't the point that you're making in this book, of course, but just
Right.
comedy and more recently horror being left out. I thought it was interesting though that you do have some horror wins included in the book. Rosemary's Baby has Ruth
Oh, no.
Gordon, and then Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde has got Frederick March. So that's really a more recent thing, I guess, a horror performance being overlooked. But I thought that Miriam Hopkins was really interesting in this film and deserving.
Yeah, when Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Frederick March tied for Best Actor, 1931-32. And it's a film I like actually very much, but the reason I like it so much is primarily due to Miriam Hopkins. As wonderful an actor as Frederick March is, and yes, boy, does he have the showier part. I mean, my God, dual personality and the makeup and all that. But, I think one of the flaws of that movie is they really overdid the makeup bit. It's like he's wearing a Halloween mask, and you really kind of lose the actor. I wish they had done less makeup and let Frederick March make us believe he has the same face, but he has a different personality, and they just went overboard. Whereas what is still truly terrifying in that movie is Miriam Hopkins. Her reactions when the scenes start and you can see in her face when he comes in the room what horrors had happened the last time. The terror in her face of, oh my God, what degradations am I going to have to be subjected to for the next hour or so? And it's actually quite disturbing because it is so heartbreaking. And it's particularly heartbreaking because she starts out as this seemingly confident, sort of music hall gal who doesn't seem to be intimidated by anyone. And then she becomes this fragile little puppy or this little
Mhm.
bird who is incredibly vulnerable and ultimately destroyed. But to go from that to the vulnerability in that performance, and like I said, the terror in that movie comes from her.
Mhm.
She wasn't nominated.
Just the way she's smiling in fear
Yeah.
gets
Yes.
me.
Right. Afraid to say the wrong thing to set him off. Yes.
And this is, I think, more heart-wrenching because it has a very real link to DV and what real people go through in a relationship like that.
Yeah. It's harrowing. And because it's pre-code, it's even more harrowing than it would have been. Well, like when they remake it in 1941, it doesn't have any of that kind of power, not near the same effect.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an amazing performance, and she's someone who I tend to not see as being capable of a performance that can move me like that. I'm usually distracted by her acting. So it does make me wonder what she could have done with a similar direction, which I think could potentially be what resulted in this performance.
Well, she's interesting because in that pre-code era, when she is at her peak in terms of getting really good roles and being popular, she has a kind of looseness, both in that movie and in a comedy like Trouble in Paradise, that she seems to lose with time. And
Yeah.
I suspect it was a sense of insecurity of, oh, now Betty Davis is on the rise. And I think her acting got a little forced and mannered when she was trying too hard to stay in the game. But when she first got there and she was just letting it roll, she was quite wonderful.
I can see that. I can see how it was a self-consciousness and a need to compete that would have made her more artificial. That makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah, yeah. So another performance that gets me that's kind of the lower key performance that you're talking about, a reacting kind of performance, is
Mhm.
Cary Grant in the Philadelphia Story.
Yeah, I mean, you got three great people: Cary Grant, Jimmy Stewart, Katharine Hepburn. Jimmy Stewart wins Best Actor, and Cary Grant isn't even nominated. Now, of course, the story always went that there was so much sympathy for Jimmy Stewart because he'd lost for Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. So there were a lot of people who wanted to make this a consolation prize. And the other thing in his favor was the extended drunk scene, which always helps. And that puts him in the showier category than Cary Grant, who is the king of underplaying in terms of comedy. But, all three of them are rather flawless in their getting laughs. They're each different in their own special, distinctive ways.
Yeah.
Cary Grant, I mean, if you think as a voter that Jimmy Stewart was the performance of the year, you would have to think that Cary Grant was in the top 5. So probably what should have happened is they both should have been included and both lost. Because
Right.
how would you pick between them? It just doesn't seem fair because Jimmy Stewart in no way steals the picture from Cary Grant. And of course, it's Katharine Hepburn's movie in the sense it's her big comeback movie. But Grant is flawless. I mean, every line is just inflected perfectly. And so, yes, he spent a lifetime of being neglected by the Academy, getting his 2 nominations for dramatic performances that people hardly ever talk about anymore. And he left all those great comedy performances, all the Hitchcock performances that now we can't believe he didn't get more award recognition in his life.
Yeah, and the reacting is the thing with
Yes.
him.
Yeah.
Just comedically, dramatically, that's his strength. And that was, I think, what made him not be chosen for these nominations.
Yeah.
Because I think about Notorious too, the
Mhm.
scenes with Ingrid Bergman where it's kind of comical because she's drunk and he's reacting to her, and again, it's his reaction that's
Yeah.
just as good as her theatrics. But
Yeah.
but that drunk scene, I think
Yeah.
explains it in a nutshell. I've actually made a reel about that scene because Grant even seems to ever so slightly be breaking, like actually laughing
Yes.
at Jimmy
Yes.
Stewart, but he's still performing. It's
Well, what I think is brilliant in that scene is Cary Grant obviously recognizes that this is Jimmy Stewart's scene. He's got the drunk thing going. He's funny. So instead of competing, I'm going to not only underplay, I'm going to underplay more in this scene than in any other scene in the movie and get my laughs that way. It's brilliant because in his way, he is just as funny, but it's going as far from what Stewart's doing as possible. And you think that was really brave in the sense of trusting your ability. Like, I can do that, and I'm going to be just as good as he is.
right. I mean, it is just top level. And it
Yes.
surprises me that more actors don't refer to him, as an
Yeah.
inspiration. But I think it is just so hidden, and it's just the very best kind of acting where you don't even know it's happening.
Yeah.
Call back to Jeff Bridges as well.
Yeah.
So I love there's a couple of performances that you told me inspired the book. I would love to hear about them. One of them is Freddie Bartholomew.
Yes. In Captain's Courageous, there were 2. We'll get to the other one. This was one of the films and performances that gave me the idea for the book because I've always loved Captain's Courageous. It's one of my favorite movies. And I love Spencer Tracy, not in this movie, though. He seems very miscast. He seems very uncomfortable. And I think maybe because his character dies, that the Academy voters who were so moved by this film thought that they were moved by his death. But what they were moved by was Freddie Bartholomew. And again, this is another example. Captain's Courageous is the story of this little boy. It's his huge transition from brat to this, wonderful child who learns about life and love and teamwork and everything. And it's one of the most extraordinary child performances we will ever see. And to honor Tracy just seems kind of crazy. First of all, Spencer Tracy's role is probably half the size of Freddie Bartholomew's in this movie. And why the Academy didn't at the very least give the kid a special juvenile Oscar, I don't know. But the impact of this movie, which is considerable, I'm always sobbing in the last 20 minutes, is all due to this boy's maturity, the way he reacts to Tracy's death, the way he deals with his returning father and how it's a different relationship now because he's a different boy. He's like a young man in a boy's body. And it's so smart, the transitions. I mean, he is so obnoxious at the beginning. And the way he changes incrementally and learns along the way, like I said, the reason we love the movie, if we love the movie, the reason we're crying is all due to what this kid was able to do in this performance. And like I said, Tracy's one of the great American actors of the golden age of Hollywood, but this is not one of the examples of his greatness.
Yeah, it's a little goofy.
Yeah, it just, you could have cast someone like Gilbert Roland or someone, who would have been plausible looking. And it's not that great a role to begin with, really. Didn't need a star. And he looks terrible in the wig and the singing. And as I said, I love the movie. Now it sounds like I'm panning it. Not at all. It's just what is so beautiful about it is little Freddie Bartholomew. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be nice to write something where you pay tribute to the overlooked person? And there we go.
Yeah, and it's true. Like, if you were to just look at the first scene and the last scene, it would seem so
Yeah,
unbelievable. So what is that
yeah,
transition that is so skilled for such a young
yeah,
performer who is just a
yeah,
remarkable actor?
yeah.
So you had another
Yeah,
inspirational
the other
performance
one, a
too.
different kind of performance and movie, but it was the same thing. Although in this case, I love both of the performances, and I'm talking about Elmer Gantry and Burt Lancaster, of course, won for the title role, and he's dazzling and fabulous and everything you could want from that character. Like he stepped out of the book, which I did read while I was writing the book, and he's so, perfectly cast. But again, if you really love the movie, Gene Simmons as the evangelist is really, I think I call her the beating heart of the movie because she again has some interesting transitions where Elmer Gantry, he doesn't. It's not as complex a character as Sister Sharon is. Sister Sarah was Falconer, Sister Falconer. She's a much more complex character because she's never what you think she's going to be. When you meet her as the evangelist, you think either she's going to be holier than thou or a charlatan, but she's so many things and she keeps you guessing. And she is a true believer, but she's a tough businesswoman at the same time. And she is somewhat holy, but she's sensual and has a desire. And she falls passionately in love and is sexual. And as I say, she surprises you so many times, but never out of character. It's never like, oh, she would never do that. It's always like, wow, there's more to her. And she's such a great actress, really, in everything. And she had such a range. And this performance, it's such an expansive performance where, like I said, it's so multifaceted and so human, so real, where he gets to do most of the showmanship, and he's great at it. But I think she's the best thing about Elmer Gantry.
Well, it's interesting what you say about multifaceted. Do you feel like a more complex role, one that you would think because of what goes into it would get more attention, sometimes doesn't or often doesn't?
Well, I guess, like I said, in sort of analyzing what she's doing, as I do in the book, I think even I was like, wow, look at this. Or maybe I never even thought of this part of what she's doing.
Yeah.
It's just that she had the thing of being up against, a great big movie star
Yeah.
in the showiest role of his career. And so I just think it was about, again, being lost in the shadow of this hugely bright light. And then you have, in a very different way, you have Shirley Jones winning Best Supporting Actress, getting a lot of attention because she was the nice girl, the ingenue, the soprano, playing a hooker. And I don't think she's very good in it, but I get why they thought, oh my God, look what Shirley Jones did. Isn't that amazing? So she had two people who were grabbing the attention. I mean, in terms of Gene Simmons, two people in the movie grabbing attention away from her. And the writer-director Richard Brooks wins the Oscar for screenplay, and Gene Simmons marries him. So three people involved in that movie went home with Oscars that night. And to me, the best thing about it wasn't even in the race. And sometimes that really sticks out. And like I said, I couldn't wait to write about her playing that character because I was fascinated by all the levels, all the surprises, as I keep saying. But I think she's a great actress, and that is probably her finest hour.
So did you feel this about the performance upon another viewing then? It wasn't your first viewing that you were seeing it?
Probably not, because in both cases that I mentioned, these were movies I knew pretty well. And
Yeah.
I think those occurred to me at the time. Certainly, like, I can't believe this didn't get, I can't believe Gene Simmons wasn't nominated. It's the year Elizabeth Taylor won for Butterfield 8, and Gene Simmons wasn't in the top five. I don't know when it occurred to me that when it was going to be a book, but I know those were the two performances that jumped out at me as, then it was, are there more that would, make it a full book and not just an essay on these two people somewhere. But as I went through all the winners, like, oh yeah, that qualifies. And some things I looked at again that I thought I might consider, and I thought, yeah, no, not really, not so much.
Well, I do think it's interesting what you're saying that it took a little time, because I wonder if that's part of it. If these people are looking at a film once and the
Yeah,
showy one, just sparkly foil catches
yeah,
their eye, and the
yeah,
person doing miniature work in the corner
yeah,
is just not going to get that attention. I'd actually had never thought about that before, but you actually do make that point in your book with several of these entries, that the showy
yeah,
role, is
yeah.
just going to be your first impression. So there was another aspect of this that was interesting. Well, for instance, the night before the passing of Maggie Smith was announced, I was
Oh,
taking another look at your book, and I was actually reading about
yeah,
Maggie Smith. You were saying that you also had kind of had that experience recently with the passing of Donald Sutherland, and talking
yeah,
about his performance in Ordinary People, which is another movie full of amazing
yeah.
show-stopping performances. But
Well, I'd like to mention both. And Maggie Smith's one of a few people in the book that shows up twice. One says the winner to the not even nominated person, and one says the not even nominated person to someone else's win. And I include it for the VIPs, for which Margaret Rutherford won as Best Supporting Actress. And I claim, as delightful as Rutherford is, if there's one performance in the VIPs that stands out, it's Maggie Smith's, which is a very subtle, quiet performance. But in a rather flashy, glossy soap, it's also the most authentic seeming, like an actual person. And what's so marvelous about that is she's playing a complete cliche of the sort of mousy secretary pining for the boss, who's handsome and has a lot of girlfriends, and she thinks, so, he could never want me. And it's like, by 1963, that was a huge cliche of, and there she is filling it in and making her a person. And to me, she's, like I said, the best thing in that. And then later in California Suite, when she wins and Michael Caine isn't nominated, and that's really unfair. I mean, they're both marvelous in that. I hate the movie, but they're marvelous in their section. And that's such a two-hander. That's really hard to compute. Yes, she is showier, but it's back and forth. It's really, if you're going to nominate one or choose one, how do you leave the other one behind? That one sticks out. And she even said that when she won the Oscar, it should go right down the middle with Michael
right.
Caine, because it was so obvious. It's banter, and they're both so skillful, and they both get their laughs, and they both bring some real honest sensitivity to the roles. So anyway, but you'd mentioned Donald Sutherland, another case of, yes, the movie wins Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay. Timothy Hutton wins as supporting actor. Mary Tyler Moore is nominated, and there's Donald Sutherland, who seemed a shoo-in to be nominated, not being nominated. And again, it's a quiet, it's unlike Donald Sutherland performances that we think of, certainly the ones he'd been doing through most of the 70s, playing a
Yes.
lot of oddballs and, and counterculture types and all that, and Casanova, to play a kind of ordinary husband father. And he's extraordinary. And that's another one that, seeing it again as I was writing about it, it felt like, wow, it's really his story. It's because Timothy Hutton's arc resolves first. And so Hutton's the catalyst for all of this. But really, the story becomes Donald Sutherland coming to terms with his marriage. And that's what happens through the course of this movie. Through what happens with their son, both sons, he has to take a really hard look at his life and find the courage to look at it honestly. And it's a slow, painful process, and it's extraordinary. Now, of course, Timothy Hutton has a leading role. And again, they both should have been up for Best Actor, and probably both lost. They probably both would have lost to De Niro in Raging Bull anyway, but that would have been more fair because Hutton's not playing a supporting role. He's wonderful. It's a very good film of that kind, the small family drama, very intelligently done, and everybody's good in it, and it still works all these years later. But yes, Sutherland, it's really a beautiful performance, and again, it's not certainly not the showiest thing going on because you're like with Shirley Jones, you're talking about Mary Tyler Moore not being like Mary Tyler Moore. Although in this case, it really worked. She really is good and making you see parts of her you never imagined when she was playing Dick Van Dyke's wife or Mary Richards. And so that was compelling. And you could see how that would get a lot of attention, certainly.
Yeah, the pure shock of it is something. But you're right. Sometimes, like, yes, this is the kind of role that does get awards when somebody shifts gears. But sometimes they shift gears into this amazing thing that absolutely deserves the attention.
Yeah.
Well, this has been an interesting book, but also this conversation has been so interesting because it's made me feel differently about watching films and watching films again, because I feel like I need to keep my own eyes open a little more and appreciate all that I'm seeing, because I think that we get told what to love a little bit
Sure.
when there's an award. As cynical as we can all be about it, I think we still internalize that, and it's really important to kind of step back and be fresh about it, and be new, and look at what's really happening in front of that, in front of us. Yeah.
And ask ourselves, which I guess I try to do, is like, okay, I was really moved by that. Why? Why was I moved? What moved me? What is this movie is staying with me? Why? Where is it coming from? Where was the foundation of what I'm feeling, or why I love this so much? What did it do, and where did it come from? Where is it in the script, in that performance, in the way that person's photographed or something? What really got me and gets me every time? And sometimes, as I've written, it's not the thing I thought it was. It's something else that's also part of it that I might have neglected early the first time.
Yeah, and I think this is what makes loving classics not a finite thing.
No,
Is that you can re-explore and come to it years later when your life has changed, you've gone through different experiences.
Of course. I always think about this, especially as I get older, about our reactions, as you just said. The movie's the same. The movie is the same. It's only you that's different. And so sometimes you're relating to a completely different character than you did, many years ago. It was like, oh, it's that story I'm tracking. And then it's like, oh no, now I see, in my case, now I see what Grandpa's going through.
Right. Yeah. Well, you're in a long-term relationship. You become a parent.
Right.
You own a pet. I don't know. It could be any number of things that could change it. So it's not one movie. It's an infinite number of movies, and it just depends on the perspective of the viewer. Yeah.
Totally.
What makes it so fun to talk about it too.
Yes.
And,
yes.
and I do love talking to you about this too, because I the thing I love about your books is really that's what it's been is look at this movie and really think about what you're seeing. So you haven't thought of your next idea then, is that right? You don't know about the next book? No.
Well, I have to say I don't think I've ever had an idea for the next book while I was promoting the current book. So this book is new, and I'll be consumed with getting it out there for probably 6 months. It doesn't take that long, but in my brain, I will be consumed with it for 6 months. And then things will all stop. Probably in this book's case, after the first Academy Awards, where the book has been out, which will be, so as of next March, then it'll be kind of, everything will be subsiding, and I'll start thinking, but I don't have something in my back pocket at the minute. So, but I don't think I ever have. And I always think, well, obviously I'm never going to do another book. So I'm not going to say that I'm never going to do one, because I've lied every time. So
8 lies. Right. I don't think you can get away with that at this point. Yeah. Okay. There's something in there. Well, come this spring, then we'll see what happens.
Yes. Right.
Well, it's been a delight to talk to you once again, and I look forward to whatever you come up with in that fertile brain of yours in
Thank
the
you,
future.
Kendall.
And good
Thank
luck promoting this one. It really is a truly wonderful book. It was so enjoyable to get your viewpoint on these 40 performances.
Makes me very happy to hear that. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
For more information on John's books, including not even nominated 40 overlooked co-stars of Oscar-winning performances, go to watchingclassicmovies.com. If you're enjoying the show, please rate and review wherever you listen. I appreciate your support. Thank you for listening. This is Kendall Krufer, watching classic movies. Until next time.